me. My name is Kenneth. I'm a registered kinesiologist, which you can think of as an exercise therapist. And today the topic is going to be on exercise, and it's going to be kind of a general guide to exercise for the general person. Okay, so it's not going to go into anything too specific because we don't have enough time for that. Okay, but the main idea I want you to get out of this is that kind of knowing what we should prioritize as we all get older, and from an exercise perspective. So most of us, the preface is that most of us shouldn't have to ask whether we should exercise or not. Okay, so we know exercise is one of the healthiest things we can do for ourselves. Okay, so exercise doesn't really cure any disease. So for example, if you have a lung condition, if you do exercise, it doesn't really cure what's going on inside, but it does a lot to help us manage it. Okay, and the same with a lot of other conditions like diabetes or cardiovascular heart problems, things like that. So most of us should exercise. Okay, so unless of course you have an unstable medical condition. Okay, so for example, if you're sick, don't try to sweat out a cold or something like that. Okay, so if you're sick, please don't exercise. If you have an unstable medical condition, also don't exercise. And of course, if you're advised by your health professional or a physician not to do so, please listen to the advice as well. Okay, but a key point is that exercise is not all or nothing. Okay, so a lot of us can exercise, it's just to what degree. Okay, so for example, people who had stroke. Okay, so decades earlier, people who had a stroke, we might tell them to just go have bed rest. Okay, but nowadays, we tell them to exercise sooner rather than later. So once they're stable, it might be just a couple of days after they have the stroke, we already encourage them to exercise because we know that kind of promotes a better recovery. Okay, so same with other condition is not that a lot of times it's not that we cannot exercise, it's just to what degree is safe and also just what is useful for us as an individual. So the common question I get is, of course, is that, so I have this condition or that condition. Okay, so what should I do? Okay, so this talk doesn't have enough time to address like specific diseases or conditions or an individual goals. Okay, so if you're interested in that, you can maybe we can talk to you individually or talk to another health professional individually. Okay, so what we're going to try to get across today is that even though we all have our own goals and problems, we are all pretty similar. Okay, so the type of exercise that keeps the body healthy is very similar across most chronic conditions. Okay, so that's why you hear the same kind of exercise advice kind of over and over again, because what everyone needs, even though there are individual differences, you might need certain exercise, but generally speaking, to be healthy from an exercise perspective, we all need to do very similar things. So in other words, the question we're trying to answer today is that what are these fundamentals? Okay, and the question we're going to ask ourselves is, are we doing these fundamentals in our day-to-day routine or weekly exercise routine? Okay, so before we talk about what the exercise itself, okay, so let's take a look at what happens to the body with age. Okay, so we're all getting older, okay, and our body kind of fall apart in a similar fashion most of the time. Okay, so for most people, what problems do we have? Okay, so a common one, kind of wear and tear on the joints. Okay, so for example, knee pain, hip pain. Okay, so that could stiffness in the fingers, shoulder joints, things like that. Bones get more brittle. Okay, so you might see as we get older, people literally shrink. Okay, their posture change. Okay, that's kind of like a form of bone fracture. A little more serious, maybe if you fall and you break a hip, that can be a major problem. Muscles get weaker and slower. Okay, so that could contribute to the risk of falling. And then you might get more fatigue easily or have more difficult physical tasks. So everything is kind of heavier or more challenging because we're weaker, we lose our muscles, and they also get slower. So people going across the street, the older person has trouble in crossing quickly. And lastly, our arteries also get stiffer and our hearts cannot function as well, cannot pump blood around as well. Okay, so all of these combined together usually kind of lead to some sort of inactivity, so we don't move as much as we get older because it is more difficult. Okay, and that can contribute to a lot of different chronic diseases. So how can exercise help with the above? Okay, so how does exercise even work to kind of maintain our body? Okay, so what is exercise? Okay, so exercise is actually stress. Okay, so stress is not always bad. Okay, stress is actually good in the right amount. Okay, so for example, if you're a working person, a little bit of stress, okay, may push you to be able to accomplish more. Okay, in terms of exercise our body, we need certain amounts of stress to let the body know what it needs to maintain. Okay, so the idea is that stress signals the body to adapt. Okay, so for example, if you're lifting a heavier object than you're used to, that stretch your muscles out. Okay, and that your muscles get stronger with the right condition. For example, with enough rest, okay, with proper nutrition. Okay, so the main point, of course, is to use it or lose it. Okay, so we need some stress to our body so that our body can keep all the qualities we want. Okay, so for example, the example before be keeping enough muscles in our body, okay, which requires us to do certain exercise to impose certain amount of stress on it. Okay, so your body knows I need to keep the muscles around. So the question is, what do we mean by it when we say use it or lose it? Okay, so what do we not want to lose? Okay, and once again, we want to think about the common problems that occur with older age. So what do we not want to lose with age? Okay, so kind of things we mentioned before. Okay, we want to keep our cardiovascular or our heart fitness. Okay, we will go into more detail with each one later on. We want to keep our muscle mass, so how much muscle we have, and strength, so how strong we are. We want to keep our joints mobility or joints health, okay, so how well we can move our joints around. And lastly, the ability to do the what I call fundamental human movements. Okay, so I'm going to go into more detail later on. So these are not the only qualities that matter, but these are the things that should be included as part of like a balanced exercise routine. By balance, I don't mean like the fall prevention. I just mean like a balanced breakfast or balanced diet, kind of a balanced routine, exercise routine. Okay, and you can always supplement the above with exercise that addresses specific goals or weaknesses. For example, if you have a high risk of fall, you might want to do more fall prevention exercise. Okay, but you should still address the ones about. So heart fitness, muscle mass, joint health, and how well we move or how well we do the fundamental human movements. So let's talk about the first one first. Okay, so for each one, we are going to talk about why it is important, what exercise help us to maintain that quality. Okay, and afterwards, what dosage of exercise is needed to get an effect. Okay, so how frequent do we need to do the exercise? How intense do we need to do it? Okay, and how much time or how we need to spend on it. Okay, so quality number one, okay, cardiovascular health. Okay, so the word cardiovascular, what it means, cardio really means the heart. Okay, vascular just means all the arteries, all the veins, all the blood vessels in the body. Actually, it includes the lymph system as well, but mostly when we talk about cardiovascular health, we're talking about the heart and how well it can transport blood around and oxygen around the body. So why is it important to maintain like a high cardiovascular health? Okay, so firstly, cardiovascular disease, which includes heart attacks, stroke, it kind of includes high blood pressure as well. Okay, but when we talk about heart attacks and stroke, they are the second leading cause of death in Canada. Okay, so it's something that we need to pay attention to. So why does that happen? Okay, so with age, our arteries become stiffer. Okay, so that actually our entire body gets stiffer. So the reason why we get wrinkles is that the kind of the elastic part of our skin get replaced by something that's a little stiffer. Okay, and the same thing happens in our arteries, in our blood vessels. Okay, so the elastic part gets replaced by something that's a little stiffer. Okay, so they tend to also become more narrow because fats get deposited into the inside of the arteries. Okay, so that gets more narrow. That can result in something like a heart attack when there's not enough blood going to the heart muscle itself. Okay, so why do we care about how does that relate to exercise then? Okay, so what they found out is that, oops, did I skip? Okay, so I think I missed a slide, but that's okay. Okay, so what exercise help with this problem? How do we maintain cardiovascular health? Okay, so any exercise that challenge our ability to use oxygen, okay, so anything that makes our heart beat faster or our breathing faster can help us to maintain our good heart health or good cardiovascular health. Okay, so usually we call these aerobic or cardio exercise. Okay, so generally speaking, they use either the large muscles in the body, kind of like our legs, okay, or uses multiple muscle groups. For example, using our arms and our legs together. Okay, so what that does is that it demands our heart to pump more blood around, so because it needs to deliver more oxygen to the rest of the body. Okay, so generally speaking, we want to sustain that for about 10 minutes at a time. Okay, the reason why we do that is that it takes a little bit of time for our heart rate to climb up. Okay, so the goal of aerobic exercise is to actually stress our hearts out a little bit by asking it to beat faster. Okay, and we want to sustain it for kind of 10 minutes at a time. Usually it takes roughly even 5 minutes for the heart rate to slowly climb up, okay, and we kind of sustain it for a little bit. Okay, so that's why I usually recommend kind of doing this at least kind of 10 minutes at a time. Okay, so what are some examples of aerobic exercise? Okay, so the most common, of course, would be the walking. Okay, so walking uses kind of the legs, a little bit of arms. Okay, gets our heart rate going a little bit, makes us breathe a little faster. Okay, can include cycling. Okay, same idea, but more of the legs. Okay, could include swimming. Okay, it could also include things like dancing as well. Okay, so pretty much anything that makes us breathe a little faster, makes our heart beat a little faster as well. So what about things like shoveling snow then? Okay, or kind of squatting, which is like sitting up and down. Okay, so how does that count? Okay, so if anyone has shoveled snow, you probably know that you do tend to get a little bit out of breath as well. Okay, so even though we're using a lot of muscle strength at the same time, our heart is still beating faster. Okay, so in fact, shoveling snow can be harder than walking up a flight of stairs in terms of how much load is on the heart. Okay, so that's why for some people, shoveling snow might not be recommended. Okay, but the key point is that anything that gets your heartbeat a little faster, gets your breathing a little faster, and if you can sustain that over, let's say, 10 minutes at a time, you can count that towards aerobic exercise. So what are the benefits of doing these aerobic exercise? Okay, so when we do this aerobic exercise, your arteries actually dilate or get bigger. Okay, so because they need more blood to go through. Okay, and afterwards, it actually stays kind of dilated or expanded. Okay, so after aerobic exercise, we tend to see a decrease in blood pressure. Okay, so if you have high blood pressure, aerobic exercise can help you to manage that. Okay, it tends to improve energy level. Okay, so the more efficient your heart is, the more efficient you can carry blood around, you tend to have more energy as well. Okay, it tends to improve blood sugar control, so it can help you manage diabetes, can help you manage weight control. Okay, and also lower risk, of course, it lowers the risk of cardiovascular diseases, including heart attacks and stroke. Okay, so if you were here last talk for Dr. Wong's talk on dementia, one of the types is vascular dementia, or kind of, roughly speaking, dementia caused by a stroke. One of the recommendations he made was that do the aerobic exercise, okay, because we know aerobic exercise can lower our risk of cardiovascular disease, okay, because it improves blood flow to the brain. Okay, and in that sense, it also actually improves cognition. Okay, so with more blood going to the brain, we tend to actually be smarter after aerobic exercise, and we tend to feel happier as well, because as we do aerobic exercise, you release hormones that makes you happier. Okay, so walking is good. Okay, so why do we want to maybe be more fit? Okay, so the idea is, why do we need to be try to be fitter than before? Okay, so they did a study in I think 2003. Okay, so they looked at people's risk of dying, okay, relative, so compared to how hard they exercise, so the exercise capacity. Okay, so on the left, you see a column that says least fit. Okay, and on the very right side, you have a column that says most fit. Okay, so in this chart, high is worse. Okay, so on the left, you see the least fit group of people have the highest risk of dying. Okay, and as you go down towards the right, people who are more fit have lower risk of dying. Okay, and they measure the exercise capacity, how fit you are, by how hard your heart can pump. Okay, so they literally put you on a treadmill, they ask you to walk, okay, and they ask you to walk faster and faster, maybe more and more, more and more incline, so steepness, okay, and they see how high you can get up to before you reach your maximum or you give up. Okay, so the people who can do this the hardest have the lowest risk of death. Okay, so that's why when we exercise, when we do aerobic exercise, we're looking at not only just doing it maybe casually, very easily, we're also trying to increase how well our heart functions. Okay, so once again, we need to put enough stress on the heart, okay, but of course safely, to get it to improve. Okay, so your body responds to a stress and responds to challenge by becoming better in a sense. So in terms of, with that in mind, okay, so how much do we need to do in order to get our heart function to actually improve? Okay, so more of course we want to challenge our heart, okay, but at the same time we don't need to push it so hard that we may run into problems. Okay, so how much is enough? Okay, so frequency. Okay, so we want to, how often do we need to do aerobic exercise? Okay, so we want to do aerobic exercise on most days of the week. Okay, usually that means 5 days, roughly 5 days a week. You can interpret that to 4 to 7 days as well, but generally speaking, you can 4 to 5 days is actually enough. So how hard do we need to do this aerobic exercise? Okay, so the guideline would say moderate to vigorous intensity. Okay, so what does moderate mean? What does vigorous intensity mean? Okay, so moderate intensity really means slightly out of breath. Okay, so if you want to be a little bit more detailed, specific, what you can try is that you can take a breath in, okay, in a normal speaking speed, okay, try to count out loud and then see how far you can get to. For example, I take a breath in and I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so in one breath, I was able to count to 16. Okay, so obviously I'm not out of breath. Otherwise, I would only be, let's say, count up to, let's say, maybe a lower number before I take a breath in. Okay, so moderate intensity means that in one breath, you can only count to about 6 to 10. Okay, so if you can easily count to above 10 like I just did, I'm not too out of breath. Okay, moderate intensity means I can count to around 6 to 10 in one breath. Okay, vigorous means that's really even more out of breath than that. Okay, so you can only count out loud to at most maybe 5 in one breath. Okay, so you can use that to measure it. Very detailed, we're using a heart rate to check. Okay, but for most purposes, we can just use our breath to check how intense we're working. Okay, and we just want to be slightly out of breath. Okay, so time. Okay, how much do I need to do in total in a week? Okay, so UHN. Okay, so University Health Network downtown. Okay, pretty much did a study. So they know that to control heart disease, you need to do 150 minutes of aerobic exercise each week. Okay, so that could be broken down to 30 minutes over 5 days. Okay, so 150 minutes total. Okay, so that's the number we usually hear when we listen to an exercise kind of guideline. Okay, but to really actually slightly more is actually better. Okay, so to really kind of reverse heart disease, okay, you actually want to do about 200 to 300 minutes each week. Okay, so that could be 40 to 60 minutes over 5 days. Okay, so if you have like a heart problem or if you have family history of heart problems, you might need to spend a little more focus on aerobic exercise. Okay, so you can try to aim for instead of just 150 minutes, maybe try to aim to closer to 200 to 300 minutes each week. Okay, so just a time for reflection. Okay, so the question we need to ask ourselves, we know maintaining our heart health is important. Okay, so we need to ask ourselves, Is aerobic exercise part of my routine right now? Okay, if it is, good, very good. Okay, the next question is how hard am I doing it? Am I going to a moderate to vigorous intensity? And how much are you doing? So how long, how much time do I spend each week on aerobic exercise? Okay, so kind of like a little checklist for yourself. Okay, am I doing this thing which is important? So next one is quality number 2 is the amount of muscles we have. Okay, so why does muscle mass matter? Firstly, we need muscles to do any sort of movement. Okay, so anytime we move, we need to use muscles. Okay, if there's something more difficult, we need to exert more force of the muscles as well. Okay, even for things like bowel movement, so we need muscles for that. Okay, so it's a different type of muscles, but we need for anything that moves in our body. Okay, so the key point is that we need to be strong enough to do the things we want to. Okay, so even, for example, even if your goal is to not fall, okay, so just to maintain your balance, if your legs are too weak, you're not going to be able to maintain your balance. Okay, so that's why a lot of even fall prevention programs have strengthening components in the legs. Okay, even strengthening component in the arms, because our first instinct when we lose a balance is to kind of reach out and grab into something like a table or a wall. Okay, so if your arms are strong enough, sometimes it can kind of stop a fall from happening as well. What happens to our muscles with age, okay, or inactivity? Okay, so pretty much we can lose kind of anywhere from 3 to 8% of our muscles every 10 years after 30 years old. Okay, and this decline, this loss of muscle happens faster after age 60. Okay, so by the time you're 90 years old, you could have lost as much as 50% of your muscles. Okay, so why is that a problem? Okay, so pretty much if you have less muscles, everything becomes harder. Okay, so on the right, let's look at a picture on the right. Okay, so what does losing 50% of our muscles feel like? Okay, an analogy that was given to me is that imagine that you're carrying a backpack and a backpack weighs as much as you right now. Okay, so for example, I'm about 165 pounds. Imagine I'm carrying a backpack that's 165 pounds as well. Okay, and I'm carrying this all day long doing everything else. Okay, because my muscles have to work kind of twice as hard. Okay, and I need to exert a lot of effort to do pretty much anything. Okay, and that's kind of what it feels like to kind of lose 50% of our muscles. Okay, so what does that kind of look like? So you can look at the picture on the left. Okay, so on the top is a 40-year-old athlete. Okay, so what you're looking at is that you can imagine you're kind of cutting off, let's say you're in a fire, you're just chopping your leg off. Okay, the white ring on the outside is your skin. Okay, the white dot in the middle is the bone. Okay, so when we're young, when we're active, you can see the dark part is the muscles. Okay, there are a lot of muscles and only a little bit of fat around the outside and a little bit in the middle. Okay, so at the bottom is a 74 years old who's not very active. Okay, so kind of the same diameter. Okay, so maybe we can still fit into the same pants. Okay, so what is happening inside? Okay, you can see there's a lot more fat on the outside. The muscle inside doesn't look as good. Okay, so there's more fats deposited inside as well. Okay, so even though as we age, even though we might kind of weigh around the same, okay, what's happening is that we're tend to be losing muscles and gaining more fat in our body. Okay, so what can we do to kind of change that or to maintain the muscles? Okay, so pretty much we need to do exercise that put high enough stress on our muscles, okay, to promote our muscles to grow and to be maintain strength. Okay, so remember that all movement requires muscles. Okay, so anytime we move, we're using our muscles, but not all movements cause enough stress to stimulate muscle growth. Okay, so for example, walking is not enough to increase muscle mass. Okay, otherwise everybody that goes for a hike, everybody that goes for a walk will be muscular. Walking doesn't cause enough stress on our muscles, even though we're using it to increase how much we have. Okay, as we get older, walking alone is not enough to maintain all the muscles in the body as well. Okay, especially with the upper body, because when you're walking, you're not really exerting that much strength with your upper body. Okay, so that's why on top of the walking, we need to supplement things with pretty much weightlifting. Okay, so it is also, weightlifting can be also known as resistance exercise or resistance training, or strength exercise, or hypertrophy exercise. Okay? Hypertrophy just means increasing how much muscles we have. Okay, so examples of resistance training or weightlifting, it could be through resistant bands. Okay, so that's just a giant elastic band that's a little difficult to pull apart. Body weight exercise. Okay, so when you're kind of squatting up and down, or kind of sit up and down, you're using the next muscles in your thighs, in your legs, and your butt muscles to get yourself up. Free weights. Free weights just means things like dumbbells or like or barbell. If you go to the gym, something like a resistant machines. Okay, and sometimes even daily life. Okay, so for example, if you're cooking and you use a heavy pan and you do that enough times, that could be enough to kind of strengthen muscles in the forearm. Okay, or maybe a little bit of shoulders and things like that. So what you use, some people ask that what is one better than the other? Okay, so the key point is that you just have to put enough stress on your muscles to promote growth. Okay, so whatever is more convenient for you. Okay, so for example, you might, let's say you're a stronger person. So if, let's say you don't have anything and you are not very strong, sometimes like a bottle of water might be enough for you. Okay, but for a very muscular person, the bottle of water is not going to be enough stress. You're not going to be able to put enough stress on your muscles to regain much from it. Okay, so that depends from person to person. So how much resistance, so firstly, what's the benefits of resistance training? Okay, so once again, the stronger we are, the easier everything becomes. Okay, so it takes more effort for a smaller person to carry, let's say something like a grocery or like a bag of flour than it is for a bigger muscular person. Okay, so the stronger we are, the easier everything becomes. Muscle training is also bone training. Okay, so for example, for those of you with osteoporosis or brittle bones, you would, if you read the guidelines, it would say you need to do weight training. Okay, so why are they related? Okay, because our muscles are connected to bones. Okay, so that's the reason why we can move. Okay, it's because our muscles pull, it pulls on our skeleton, which allows us to move our body. Okay, so stress on the muscles, it's also stress on the bone. Okay, and our bones is a living tissue. Okay, so it needs enough stress to keep strong. Okay, so if you're not stressing your bones, it will also get more brittle. That's why swimming alone is not good for people with osteoporosis. You might hear people with osteoporosis need to do weight bearing exercise, meaning you're kind of standing up by yourself, you're not floating in water, or you're not sitting on a bike, you're supporting your body, because we need to put stress on the bones to be just to maintain itself, to stay strong for our bones. Okay, muscles also support our joints. Okay, so it kind of protects our joints. Okay, so if you look, imagine like a skeleton, it doesn't stand up by itself, right? We need the muscles around to kind of stabilize it. Okay, it helps to maintain the alignment of our joints. Okay, so even for people with knee arthritis, okay, so kind of wear and tear on the knee joints or even the hip joints, we still tell them you need to strengthen the muscles in your legs, around the knee, around the hips. Okay, because the stronger your muscles are, the more support you have on the joint. Okay, the more aligned you can keep a proper alignment, the less stress there are or less wear and tear on the joint itself. Okay, so that's, even weight training is important even for joint pain. So how much do we need? Oh, sorry, continue. Even more benefits. Okay, so endurance training for trunk muscles in the back. Okay, so the back muscles help us to maintain posture. Okay, so as we get older, we tend to be more and more rounded forward. Our back muscles may get a little weaker, a little bit more lazy. Okay, so we need to train our back muscles to straighten out our posture, okay, and also protects us against back injuries as well. Having more muscles makes it easier to manage weight and diabetes in the long run. And generally speaking, we tend to prefer a muscular look. Okay, so that could be subjective. Okay, but sometimes we exercise not just for health, but also to look sometimes look better as well. Okay, so that's something to think about. I'm going to skip this one. Okay, so how much and how hard do we need to lift weights? Okay, so frequency. More is generally better. Okay, so usually we'll want to train the target muscles maybe 2 to 4 times a week. Okay, but we need enough recovery for the training muscles in between sessions. Okay, so usually when we lift weights the day after and the day after that, we tend to feel pretty sore. Okay, so we need to give the muscle that soreness to kind of go away first. Okay, because the muscle is still recovering. So generally speaking, we want to train like any muscles kind of at most every other day. Okay, so give it kind of 48 hours in between to rest. Okay, but if you had a choice between training a muscle kind of once a week versus let's say 2 times a week, 2 times a week is going to be better than training it just once a week. Okay, so and how hard do I need to train? Okay, so some people ask, how much do I need to lift then? Do I use 2 pounds? Do I use 10 pounds? Do I use 50 pounds? Okay, so that depends on the person. Of course, the a stronger person is going to lift more than a less muscular person. It depends on the muscles. Okay, the weight you can lift with your forearm muscles is going to be much less than the weight you can lift with your shoulders. Okay, because your shoulders is a bigger muscle, a stronger muscle. Okay, so how do we tell how much weight to use? Okay, we want to use enough weight so you can only do a movement 6 to 15 times at one go. Okay, so if I tell you, let's say I'm doing this exercise where I'm training my shoulders by pushing a weight up. Okay, if I tell you I can do this 100 times in one go, the weight is too light for me. Okay, if I can only do this 2 times at most, the weight is a little too heavy for me for this movement. Okay, so we want to select a weight that I can only do about 6 to 15 times in one go. Okay, so a little bit of a challenge. Okay, so how much time per week do we need to do in order to even see an effect? Okay, so sometimes people ask, I lift once a week, how come my muscles are not getting any bigger or stronger? Okay, so we need to do kind of enough. So what is enough? Generally speaking, we need to actually do about 10 to 20 sets per week per muscle to see an increase in muscle mass. Okay, so back to the example of the shoulders. Let's say I do this 10 times, okay, in one go. I call this 1 set. In a week, I need to do at least 10 sets in order to really see a big difference. Okay, so if you split that out into, let's say you're lifting for 3 days a week, you need to do kind of 3 to 4 sets each day in order to see like a significant change. Okay, so sometimes when you ask like, why am I not getting bigger? Sometimes you might not be just, A, you might not be lifting heavy enough, and B, you might not be lifting enough times or enough volume in a week. Okay, so which muscle should I train in my body? Okay, so in an ideal world where we have unlimited time and unlimited energy, okay, we will train all the muscle groups because all the muscles in the body tends to get weaker with age. Okay, but generally speaking, we want to focus on muscles that extend our body. Okay, so let's look at this picture. So what happens to our posture with age? Okay, we tend to just kind of, everything becomes more flex, okay, or we become more slouch. Okay, so we need to practice more of the opposite. We need to train the muscles that does the opposite of this. Okay, we need our muscles to straighten ourselves back up. Okay, so we need to spend more time training the muscles, let's say in the back. Okay, we need to train the muscles then the thighs, so you can kind of straighten out the knees. Okay, we need to shrink the muscles in the butt area. Okay, so we can stand a little taller. Okay, pretty much if you want to think about in a simpler manner, it's just all the muscles in the back, those tend to expand our body tends to extend the body. Those muscles we need to spend a little more time on, just because in our daily activities, we tend to do more of the opposite. For example, when we're sitting down, we tend to be around a little more forward. When we're sitting, our hips and flex, our knees is flex. Okay, and we don't use our butt muscles a lot. Okay, so we need to practice more of the muscles that we do not use. Okay, so same question as before. Okay, is resistance exercise or is weightlifting part of your routine? Okay, are you maintaining the muscles in the body? Okay, and if you are, that's good. Okay, the next step would be to ask, okay, am I doing it heavy enough to really stimulate the growth, or at least maintaining it? Okay, and am I lifting enough times to once again to maintain my muscles or to grow it if that's your goal? Okay, so just something to kind of think about. We need to maintain the muscles in our body. So we talk about muscles. Okay, so if all we care about is how much muscles we have, why don't we just use one of these? Okay, so what are these? These are the devices you might find at Amazon, where you stick on the muscles you want to train, and it sends the electric shock to your body, and it kind of contract your muscles. Okay, so why don't we just kind of stick a whole bunch on our body and then turn it on and let the device exercise for us. Okay, so firstly, these things are pretty painful when we turn it up. Okay, so you're literally kind of inducing a cramp in your muscles. Okay, so that can be pretty painful. They even use similar devices to simulate going into labor for men that want to find out what that feels like. Okay, so that can be painful. Secondly, we actually do care about how well we move. Okay, so the example would be, we don't want to fall. It's not falling relies on muscles, but it's also about how well we control our body as well. Okay, so the next quality number 3, okay, is the ability to do the fundamental movements. Okay, so what are the fundamental movements? Okay, what I mean by them is movements we need to do regardless of how old we are. Okay, so let's think about when you wake up in the morning. Okay, what are some things you need to do every single day? Okay, so first thing, you might need to sit up. Okay, and you might need to get up from the bed. Okay, or you might, and then afterwards you might go to the bathroom. Okay, so in that case, you are sitting up and down. Okay, if let's say you drop something, you need to bend over to reach down to grab it. Okay, you see a door, you need to push the door. Okay, or sometimes the door can be you need to pull it. Okay, or you have to reach over to somewhere and then pull something towards you. Walking. Okay, so walking is kind of single leg balance, because you're transferring weights from one side to the other, and that should be grouped together with lunging or weight shifting. Okay, I'm going to give more examples of what each one is later on. Okay, but the key point is we need to do all of these while maintaining our balance. Okay, so the question is, okay, if I need to do this every day, why do I need to spend extra time to practice them? Okay, the answer is sometimes we don't do all of these in a day. Okay, so for example, this is what we show people when they are at a high risk of falling, and we tell them, if you fall, this is how you get up in the ground. Okay, so this is not something we practice every day. Okay, and this is something that can be difficult for some of us already. Okay, so it does require some techniques and practice. Okay, but at the same time, it also requires enough strength as well. So going back to the weightlifting, if you're not strong enough, even if I show you how to do this, you're not going to be able to do it. Okay, but the key point is that it's always easier to maintain something than to relearn it. Okay, so because this movement is not something we practice all the time, it's something that's going to be hard for us when we need it. Okay, so usually I have to say that the ability to get up from the floor for older adults is like being able to swim for children or adults. Okay, so most people don't need to go swim often. Okay, but it may save your life when you need it. So if you do fall in the water, if you If you know how to swim, your chances of surviving is much better than if you don't. Same with getting up from the floor, maybe not as extreme as the swimming example, okay, but sometimes you have heard a story of people seniors falling and not being able to get help. Okay, so it's something that we want to practice while we still can, of course, and done in a safe manner. Okay, and it's the same concept with the other movements. We need to practice these movements so we don't lose it. Okay. So what are examples, going back to the different movements? Okay, example of a squatting movement. Okay, so pretty much that's the ability to get up and down from a chair, okay, without falling once again. Okay, so during exercise, we just kind of increasing the difficulty. Okay, so we train harder during exercise so that everyday life is easier. Okay, so we train the squatting movement so that it's easier for you to get up and down from a chair. Okay, hinging movements. Okay, so that's kind of bending down and pick something up. Okay, it could be as light as a towel. Okay, or it could be, imagine reaching down to grab your groceries and carrying it. Okay, when we're exercising, we might do something like a deadlift, which is just an exaggerated form of bending over and picking something up. Examples of push movement. Okay, so once again, the example of pushing through a door. Okay, you might have seen seniors who have, if it's a heavy door, they have trouble pushing something and while maintaining control of the body. Okay, so how do we practice that? Okay, one way is to do something like a push-up. Okay, it doesn't have to be on the ground. It could be on the wall. Okay, if you're a little better, you can be maybe on an elevated surface like a countertop or something like that. Okay, but the idea is we're pushing up, pushing movement. Opposite would be a pulling movement. Okay, so anytime we're kind of pulling our elbows behind us, okay, that could be considered pulling movement. The difference sometimes ask, what's the difference between doing this sitting down and doing this standing up? Okay, so the idea of these practicing movement is that we want to be able to control our entire body. Okay, so when you're sitting down, you are using kind of similar muscles, okay, between the sitting and standing. Okay, but when you're sitting down, you don't really have to control your legs. You don't have to control the trunk muscles so that you're not falling over. Okay, so sometimes it's, even though we might train the muscles in one way, we need to practice the movement as well by kind of standing up and doing it as well. Examples of a lunge or weight shift. Okay, so to move or to walk, we have to be shifting weight side to side. Okay, so for example, you might have seen a senior, when they walk, they kind of shoveling their feet. Okay, they're not able to lift one leg up, put it down, and then lift the other leg up. Okay, the reason is that because they are unable to shift their weight over the one leg, okay, which frees up the other leg to kind of lift it up and kind of shift side to side. So the weight shift could be side to side between two legs, could be forward and back. Okay. So the exaggerated version of this is kind of like a lunging movement. So you might just kind of imagine kind of reaching over to one side, or you just take a big step forward, or you put a lot of your weight onto the front leg and able to shift it back as well. Okay, so sometimes it's hard to incorporate all of these together. Okay, so why is that? What is one example where it kind of puts everything together? Okay, so Tai Chi is a good example where you incorporate a lot of the weight shifting, a lot of the up and down. And what that means is that actually they have done research on Tai Chi, okay, and it is effective at reducing the risk of falls, okay, because they are practicing these type of movements, okay, in a fairly regular manner. Of course, it might not be appropriate for those already at high risk of falls, okay, because Tai Chi can be quite difficult. Okay, but the key point is always kind of, we want to maintain these movements through regular practice. Okay, so one way to do that might be through Tai Chi. Okay, so unfortunately, I'm very close out of time, so I'm just going to skip to how much do we need to do, how much often should we practice these movements. Okay, so ideally, we want to practice these movements most days of the week. Okay, so once again, it could be around roughly 5 days. Okay, in terms of how hard it is, it doesn't have to be very hard. Okay, just a regular practice. You can think of Tai Chi is not very strenuous exercise. Okay, but we are practicing the movement. Okay, on one day, so you can each day, or you can kind of pick one movement, okay, and increase the difficulty of it. Okay, so once again, the idea is that when we exercise, we're training a little harder. Okay, so that everyday life activity becomes easier. Okay, so during one day of the week, you can choose to, let's say, load up let's say the squats. Okay, so for example, instead of just doing body weight, maybe you can hold something like a weight in front of you, okay, and just squatting down, and so you're pushing up more than your body weight. Okay, same with the other movements. Okay, so how much time do we need to spend? Okay, so the more important is just the regular practice. Okay, so if you want to incorporate into your routine, it might be just for light intensity, just incorporate that into part of your warm up. Okay, if you do so, you're training more high intensity, you can incorporate that as part of your strength training. Okay, so same question as before. Okay, so are you practicing all these type of movements? Okay, so which ones maybe are you a little bad at? Okay, so for example, do you find that getting up and down from a chair is getting more difficult? Okay, in that case, you might need to spend a little more time practicing that. Okay, same if you drop something, it's very difficult for you to bend down and pick up something. Okay, you might need to spend more time practicing that as well. If you're a little younger, it's not a bad idea to learn how to safely just practice be able to go down towards the ground, okay, and then getting back up from the ground. Okay, so if you're a little younger, if you're a little fitter, it's not a bad idea to practice these things. Okay, so the question once again is, okay, so am I doing these things, okay, and am I doing it enough? Okay, so the last quality that I want to talk about today is joint mobility. Okay, so joint mobility kind of refers to how mobile, how well you can move your joints. Okay, and also kind of refers to how flexible you are as well. So we all have seen kind of babies and toddlers, they're all very flexible, right? So in the picture here, we see the baby being able to put kind of his mouth onto his foot. Okay, but as we get older, we have seen people who are very, very stiff as well. So that's kind of the picture on the right. Okay, so a lot of people have trouble kind of bending over and touching the toes. Okay, so the question is, what happened? Okay, so how do we get from being so mobile with very flexible joints and muscles to the person on the right being pretty stiff and pretty stiff? So why do we get stiff or tight as we get older? Okay, so there are obviously age-related changes to ligaments and joints. Okay, so our ligaments, like kind of our skin, kind of like our blood vessels that we talked about before, okay, they also get a little bit stiffer. So the elastic component in the body gets replaced by something that's a little bit stiffer. Okay, so that's why with age we naturally do get a little bit more stiff. In terms of our joints, they're of course kind of wear and tear. So usually we refer to that as osteoarthritis. So kind of the protective layer between the joints get worn out. Okay, so you kind of get a little bit of bone-on-bone contact. Okay, so sometimes it can be pretty painful. Usually that happens to joints that we move a lot, kind of like our hips, our knees, and a lot of times our fingers and hands as well. Okay, so these are kind of what happens as we get older. Okay, but the person we looked at before is not that old. Okay, so why is he so stiff? So that how tight our body is also depends on our lifestyle. Okay, so the key point is that our body adapts to what we do most often. Okay, so the picture here on the bottom is as a student or like an office worker. He sits a lot, he stares at the computer a lot, he's in this kind of hunched over position a lot. So your body adapts to what we do the most often. Okay, so our body adapts, in this case, adapts to being kind of rounded over with a head kind of forward posture. Okay, so if the muscles in the front kind of gets tightened a little bit, okay, our muscles in the arms. As we sit our hip flexors, because we're in this seated position, the back of our legs gets kind of tighter, front of the hips gets a little tighter. Okay, so that's why a lot of people have trouble kind of bending over and touching their toes, because we are in this, most of us are in a seated position a lot of time, and our legs kind of adapted to being in this position. Okay, so the question, of course, is next question is, how much flexibility do we need? Okay, so do we want to be as flexible as like a baby? Okay, so probably not. Okay, so why do we don't want to be too flexible? Okay, so we have seen kind of babies walk around, they kind of like little drunk people, right? They are not very stable. Okay, and that's the price we kind of pay for being very, very flexible. Okay, so we're not very sturdy. Imagine like a bridge or some like a building. It does have a little flexibility. So bridges actually kind of moves a little bit with the wind, things like that. Okay, because if it's too stiff, it will actually get destroyed when there's a heavy wind or there's a little bit of earthquake. Okay, but if it's too loose, it also is also a problem as well. Okay, so that's why we don't want to be either off. So we don't want to be we don't need to be too flexible. Okay, but we don't want to be so stiff either. Okay, so how much flexibility do we need? Okay, so we need just enough, okay, for our goals, which may include enough for daily activities. Okay, so kind of being enough to reach overhead. Okay, kind of when we put on our coats, we're going to reach our arms kind of downwards like this or upwards like that. Okay, we need enough for our daily activities. Okay, and we need enough flexibility for what we like to do or our hobbies. Okay, so for example, golf actually requires a lot of trunk rotation. Okay, it needs a lot of little bit of shoulder flexibility as well. Okay, so how much you need kind of depends on what you like to do, what you need to do in the daily life. Okay, but we do need a little bit of flexibility. So how does exercise help us with joint mobility and also muscle flexibility? An important thing to keep in mind is that there's actually no direct blood supply to the inside of our joints. Okay, so if you search on like YouTube or something for like a joint surgery, when you open up, it's not like blood that's inside. It's like a brownish liquid inside. That's actually the lubricants in between our joints. Okay, but that's not kind of blood. Okay, so important thing how exercise help is that as we move, that kind of brownish fluid gets kind of pumped in and out of the joints. Okay, so that fluid is for lubrication, is for kind of nutrients to your bones. It also waste from the inside of your joints as well. Okay, so the point is that motion is lotion. Okay, so as you move, your joints actually get a little bit more mobile. Which is why people with osteoarthritis in the hands or anywhere in the body, they tend to be stiffest, the most stiff in the morning. Okay, so and after they move a little bit, they tend to feel a little better. They tend to feel a little more mobile afterwards. Okay, so that's the kind of fluids and lubricants being pushed in out of the joints, which is why we would like to be able to move, just practice moving our joints every day for that purpose. Okay, we also need to kind of undo our daily, what we do most of the time. So a lot of us kind of hunch over a lot, and we sit a lot, think of driving, reading, anything seated, we're in this position a lot. Okay, so we need to teach our body to do the opposite a little bit more. Okay, so we need to teach our muscles to be at the right kind of tightness or in the right position. So we need to spend more time in the opposite kind of position. Okay, so if we sit a lot, we need to spend more time kind of standing up straight with the shoulders open. Okay, so that's the more we do something, the more your body adapts to it. So because we sit a lot, we need to spend at least a little more time doing opposite to undo the negative effects of sitting. So what are joint mobility exercise, or what kind of exercise can we do to improve how our joints move? Okay, so there are kind of two major types. Okay, so the exercise that move our joints through a variable range of motion. Okay, range of motion refers to how far we can move, let's say our shoulders, our hands. Okay, sometimes we just want to practice moving it. Okay, so because we spend a lot of time kind of just moving our hands or body just this small area in front of our body, we don't spend a lot of time practicing reaching, let's say, across the body, kind of on top of the body, or kind of to the side and back. Okay, so we want to kind of practice moving through this range. Okay, the idea once again is use it or lose it. Okay, so if we don't use these area at the outer edges, we're going to lose that ability to go there. Okay. And then secondly, there are exercises that kind of teach our muscles to be the right tightness. Okay, so that's the classic stretching exercises that we do. Okay, so things like having our hands, our shoulders, arms across the body and pulling, feeling that stretching effect on the shoulders. Okay, so that's another type. Okay, so at the bottom is pretty much what I said just now. Okay, so they are joint rotation exercise. So literally just moving your joints is good for us. Okay, and sometimes you need to stretch it a little bit. Okay, so for example, if your hands are very tight because you hold onto a cane or walk all the time, sometimes you might need to spend a little bit more time kind of actually stretching out. Okay, so we need to move our finger, the joints. Okay, so that includes kind of trying to open it as far as you can and trying to close the hand as much as you can as well. Okay, and sometimes we do kind of stretch out the muscle as well. So it's kind of examples of what a daily practice of joint rotation will look like. Okay, so literally you can just kind of move your joints. So sometimes, like you say, do like a cross and a circle for most joints. For example, assuming you don't have any neck problems, okay, you can move your head side to side. You can move your head up and down. Okay, and you can also move your head in a circle. Okay, so same of our arm muscles or arm joints. Okay, you can move your arms side to side. Okay, top to bottom. Okay, and then in a circle. Okay, so that doesn't apply to all joints. For example, your elbows doesn't really turn side to side so much. It just kind of bend and extend. Okay, but the idea is move the joints through their variable range most days of the week. Okay, another example will be something like this. This is a form of qigong called Gum. Okay, which is you can see the motion is has a lot of different similar ideas. So the first one, you kind of reaching upwards. Okay, so we don't spend a lot of time reaching upwards in our daily life. Okay, so we just practice being able to reach up a little more. Okay, just below that, you see kind of rotation of the body. Okay, kind of moving the hips, moving the spine a little bit. The one next to it, you see the bending over and then reaching up. Same idea, kind of going through the available range, and then so on and so forth for the other ones. Okay, so that's one kind of pretty good form of daily practice that you can do. And of course, the classic stretching exercise. These are not all the ones you can do. Okay, but these are the examples. But the areas that we tend to be most tight in. Okay, so back of the leg, we tend to be pretty tight. Okay, front of the chest tends to be pretty tight. So those are the areas sometimes the calf muscles are a little tight. So we do find the areas that we're tight in, okay, and just spend a little more time stretching it out. So how much do we need to do to actually make a difference? Okay, so for flexibility exercise or joint mobility exercise, it really should be done kind of daily. Okay, and the idea is that our body adapts to what we do most often. Okay, and most of us sit a lot. Most of us kind of hunch over a lot. Okay, if you just stretch for like, I don't know, 30 seconds, like 2 to 3 times a week, that's not really going to make a difference. You really need to spend more time in a position that you're not used to. Okay, so ideally you should do joint mobility exercise every day. You should do stretching exercises every day. Okay, so how hard do we need to do? Okay, the key point is don't move into pain. Okay, so we, like any exercise, joint mobility exercise and stretching exercise needs to be a little bit challenging for your body to adapt. Okay, so once again, if it is too easy, your body is not, it's pretty lazy, it's not going to make a change. Okay, so another phrase you can remember is knock on the door of discomfort, okay, but don't go through. Okay, meaning it can be a little bit uncomfortable, so it can be, you can have that kind of stretching feeling, that tight feeling, okay, but we don't want to go into pain. Okay, so only time you go into pain is if it's directed by a physical therapist. Okay, for example, let's say you have a knee replacement. Okay, after your knee replacement, you do need to really kind of bend the knee, even though it's painful, and straighten the knee, even though it's still painful, okay? Because if you don't, the joint, it's not gonna have the full range after your heals, okay? And that's a problem, okay? But that's something that has to be directed by a physiotherapist, okay? And then of course, always warm up first as well, okay? So I have a friend who was, before he went on a run, he was trying to stretch out his thigh muscles. And he actually tore something from just stretching being cold. Okay, so stretching, you also need to warm up. Warm up just really means, once again, getting up with a little bit of sweat, so you can feel your body kind of getting a little warmer. Okay, you can feel more blood moving around the body. Okay, that's a little safer for stretch exercises. For joint mobility exercises, okay, so start from smaller range, okay, and then to bigger range. Okay, so still do a warm up for flexibility or joint mobility exercises. Okay, so how much time do we need to spend in a stretch or going through moving our joints? Okay, for joints, okay, just spend enough time so you can move through the entire range. Okay, so it can be just, for example, side to side, the neck. Okay, just be just 35 times. Okay, up and down 35 times. Okay, and in a circle, sometimes even just once is enough. Okay, but once again, be careful anything in the spine or the neck. Okay, not everyone should do the rotation. Okay, especially if osteoporosis, sometimes the rotation is not appropriate for you. Okay, but in terms of timing, just enough time so you can move through the entire, what is appropriate for you, the range is appropriate for you. Okay, for stretching, the classic, sorry, for stretching, the classic recommendation is that you hold for at least 30 to 60 seconds, or until you kind of feel a little bit of a relaxation. Okay, so the idea, we're trying to get our muscles to relax a little bit. Okay, so you want to hold until you feel it's actually loosening up a little bit. What muscles should I stretch? Okay, or what joints do I move? Okay, so for joints, really just move through all the joints in your body. Okay, so sometimes even the toes. Okay, so our toes and the feet, there are bones inside. We can move those joints as well. Okay, so it can go from you can kind of scan. You can think of like a scanning from the top down. Okay, so move the neck, move the shoulders, move the spine a little bit, move the hips, move the knee, move the ankles, move the joints of the hands and the feet. For stretching, we really just want to stretch where we're tight in. Okay, so what are areas that most we are commonly tight in? A lot of times people get shoulder pain, the top of the neck, that tends to be pretty stiff. Okay, because when we get kind of stressed out, we naturally kind of shrug up, and we sit a lot of times with shoulders rounded forward. Okay, so that could be one area where most people are tight in. Once again, the front of the chest, just because we are in this kind of solid position a lot of times. Front of the hips and the back of the thighs, because we sit a lot for most of us. The calves, as we get older, also tend to get a little tight as well. Okay, so kind of stretch where you're tight in, but these are the common areas where you might find you need to spend more time in. Okay, so once again, the question is, are you doing joint mobility training every day? So are you regularly moving your joints through the available range of motion? Okay. Are you spending more time kind of stretching out the muscles that you feel tight in? Okay. So once again, we ideally want to do this most days of the week or kind of daily. Okay, so we went through a lot of different qualities. Okay, so there are a lot of things to remember, but what are the most important pieces? Okay, so major things to remember. Okay, so if you do nothing else, just go for some sort of walking or rope exercise. So walking is one of the simplest things we can do to maintain our general health. Okay, so it kind of improve our aerobic system. It kind of works on our balance a little bit. Okay, or at least it maintains it. It helps us to at least move our joints in different ways. Okay, so we can at least swing the shoulder, at least we're not sitting down a lot when we're walking. So if nothing else, and if you're able to, walking is one of the simplest things we can do to maintain our general health. Okay, secondly, get strong first. Okay, so kind of how I mentioned before, the older we get, the more important it is to have a weightlifting routine or resistance training routine. Okay, so muscles, that's one of the things that we lose with age, and we need muscles for everything. Okay, so don't be afraid to lift weights. Okay, get some help to learn how to lift weights properly. Okay, but have some sort of weightlifting routine. And also, in general, have a balanced routine. Okay, so I like to say what you're not doing is probably what you need to do. It's kind of like with eating. Okay, we want to have a balanced diet for in terms of nutrition, and we want to have a balanced routine in terms of physical activity and exercise. Okay, so the things, once again, we would like to kind of maintain our heart health. Okay, we need to maintain our muscle strength. We need to maintain how well we move our body. Okay, so that's a fundamental human movement. So the ability to kind of to sit up and down, move up and down, change levels, being able to push something, pull something, being able to shift a weight from side to side, sometimes even being able to get up on the floor. Okay, so those are the things we need to want to practice. Okay, and lastly, we want to have enough joint mobility. So that's the moving our joints daily, okay, and also stretching the muscles that we feel tight in. So how do we kind of fit everything together? Okay, so one of the easiest way is to, once again, have a checklist. Okay, so that goes back to the idea of having a balanced routine. So what is on this checklist? Okay, so on most days of the week, okay, we want to be walking about 30 minutes total. Okay, so you can break that down into smaller chunks. Okay, for example, you can walk 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening. You can add that up together. So you don't have to do like 30 minutes in one go. Okay, but we want to do walk, let's say aim for 30 minutes total most days of the week. So that's about 4 to 5 days. If you can do more, you can do more. Okay, so most days of the week, we want to move our joints through a available range of motion. Okay, so literally just go from the top down or the bottom up, move all the joints. Okay, so the neck, the shoulders, the spine, the hips, the knees, ankles, fingers, and toes. Okay, most days a week, practice a fundamental human movement. Okay, so the most common one maybe is just really the ability to sit up and down. Okay, so that's actually good training for the thigh muscles as well, and the butt muscles as well. Okay, but practice, just pick any one and just practice it. Okay, so on Monday, we just practice a few times sitting up and down. On Tuesday, we go to wall and practice copying push, like do a little bit of push up. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, so sometimes, even though I mentioned for weight training, you only have to do like 2 to 3 times a week. Okay? Another way you can think of it is just you can just break it down into smaller separate areas each day. Okay, so for example, you want to train a muscle that is weak. Okay, so let's go back to the example of your thigh. Let's say you have trouble, feel like you have trouble getting up and down from the chair. Okay, so you might want to spend one day of the week at least, train that muscle a little bit. Okay, so work on the quadricep muscle, which is the one that can extend the knee. Okay, so you want to do a little bit of weightlifting for that. Okay, for another person, it might be different. Okay, so another person might be they feel like they can't set their arms up high anymore. Okay, so you want to practice maybe a little bit of pushing cowboys. Most of the week, stretch an area that is tight. Okay, so if you find that you have a lot of shoulder pain or shoulder stiffness, okay, maybe you want to spend, then you need to spend a little more time stretching out that muscle. Okay, same with the other areas. So kind of just explore your body. Okay, kind of know, okay, so I know I'm pretty tight here, a little tight there. Okay, spend a little more time just stretching out. Okay, and lastly, maybe just most days of the week, work on one or two of your weaknesses or specific problems that you have. Okay, for example, if you know that your balance is not as good as before, okay, maybe do 1 or 2 balance exercise most days of the week as well. Or if you know you have osteoporosis and your spine is actually changing shape a little bit, okay, you need to spend a little more time working on that extension, working on the muscles in the back as well. Okay, so just kind of, I like how I like this checklist is because you pretty much build up a daily routine of some kind. Okay, so the routine doesn't have to be the same every single day. Okay, but you know, okay, I need to walk a little bit. Okay, I need to move joints a little bit. Okay, I want to practice a movement. Okay, I need to train at least one muscle that is weak, stretch an area that is tight. Okay, and these are, and then we have one or two exercises that that are specific for me to work on my problems. Okay, so of course, kind of identifying what you need to do, you might need a little bit more help from like a qualified health professional. Okay, but that is a mindset that we're going through. We want to have like a balanced routine for exercise. Okay, and you want to have a consistent habit of exercising as well. Okay, so I realize it can be pretty difficult to piece things together. Okay, so that's why you might want to talk to like an exercise professional to help you kind of build up like a exercise prescription or exercise program that you can follow. And even just going to an exercise class might be would have incorporated a lot of these things already as well. Okay, but once again, we're going through our mind. Okay, and mind, is that enough? So for example, like some people just do, I like to do Tai Chi. Is that enough? Okay, did my heart rate go up a little bit? Maybe not quite enough. Okay, so we need to supplement that with maybe a little bit of walking as well. Okay, but with a mental checklist of what a balanced exercise routine is. Okay, and that is the main message that I'm trying to get across today, having a balanced routine for physical activity and exercises. Okay, so thank you for listening. Okay, I hope everyone find that helpful. Bye-bye.